Can Damon and his pack uncover the secret of the mysterious necklace and save Casey from the rogues' clutches before it's too late? The stakes have never been higher. Join the hunt for the truth and subscribe now for the next thrilling chapter in the saga of Damon and Casey. Chapter 39, Bloody Dice, Damon's P.O.V. The living room floor was spotted with a thin trail of blood that led towards the infirmary. The pack was crowded outside of the medical room door, listening with concerned looks as blood-curdling screams emanated from behind the locked door. Still wolf. I pushed past them, sending out a few warning growls to order them out of my way. Seeing injuries of my own, they obediently backed away and cleared the door for me. Still clutching the locket in my mouth, I noticed that even in a few seconds the gaping wound in my neck had already declined to tender scar tissue. With a grunt, I rammed the force of my body against the door, breaking it off one of its hinges. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Diana and Jana were on either side of Casey's cot, Diana trying to keep Casey's hands pinned against the mattress. What the hell is going on? Spitting the locket into my hand as I shifted, ignoring the fact I was stark naked. The blade, Jana informed, sweat beading off her brow while she struggled against Casey's thrashing. It was silver and tipped with wolfsbane, she's suffering from delusions and a rising fever. Her defensive instincts are kicking in against whatever she's seeing. What can you do? I demanded, storming up beside her and looking down at Casey's sweat-drenched body, her skin as white as the sheets. Her claws were fully extended and her canines were elongated. However, her eyes were flickering colors of all shades from her human grey eyes, to lust black, to wolf silver, desirable gold, and to blood, lust red. The best I can do is treat the wound with herbs, but I don't know how much that can help her. It's not looking too good. Damon, do whatever you can to save her. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Watching with a torn heart as Casey writhed in pain. Will you please put on some clothes first? Diana requested through clenched teeth, her hands firm around Casey's wrists. There should be some pants in the cabinet behind me. Just hurry, I could really use some help, Jana said, her voice becoming strained at the end as Casey cried out. I found the jeans on the shelf and pulled them on and slipped the heart into my pocket, returning to Jana aside while giving Diana a look. I need to flip her over. Damon, take her arms. Maybe if she recognizes you she'll calm down a bit. Diana, grab her legs. Casey is known for having quite a kick. We did what she asked, Casey violently trying to strike out at us. Her entire back was drenched in blood, the gaping hole just beneath her shoulder still spilling crimson. Get off of me. Casey howled, her eyes glowing red as she lashed out at Jana, catching the healer's hand in her mouth. Jana bit back a yelp before she pried her hand from between Casey's lethal canines. I'm really sorry, Casey whimpered innocently, looking up at Jana with grey eyes. Jana was momentarily stunned, but then Casey screamed again and flailed against my grip. I yelled, demanding for something to be done. In trying, she argued. Just keep her restrained. Jana ripped Casey's shirt open so that it exposed her entire backside. She then had to unclasp Casey's bra, which was right beneath the wound. Why hasn't any of the bruising or cuts healed? Diana asked warily, looking wide-eyed at the abrasions all over her daughter's body. Silver knuckles and blades, no doubt, Jana replied inferently, Diana's eyes darkening. Casey looked up at me with black eyes, a smirk coming to her face, and for a moment I thought she was back to her old self. What happened to your shirt? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Biting her lips seductively as she eyed me with her head laid against the table. But then she winced and her eyes flickered to crimson. Her face twisted with rage. Let go of me or I swear I will skin you alive. Keep your grips. This might hurt a bit, Jana said as she grabbed a bottle of blue liquid from the shelf and poured a few drops onto the wound. Casey screamed bloody murder as she started convulsing, kicking Diana in the stomach. You were right about her having a kick, she groaned, grabbing for her daughter's ankles again. Nightshade extract should run the wolfsbane out of her system eventually. But it depends how much of the poison was on the blade. It could be a few days, if she's lucky enough to live through it. Jana sighed. If she's lucky enough to live through it, I repeated with rising anger. She will make it and you're going to make that happen. I yelled, feeling Casey only gently tugging against my hold. I've done what I could. It's up to chance now. Please, Jana. Diana pleaded. She's all I have left. The only thing that could help her now is the time to heal. But not everything will. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'll keep her in restraints. The delusions can only get worse as the poison circulates. Jana's expression was uncertain as she stared down at Casey, the poor girl finally tiring herself out. What about the moon fragment? Can't that do anything? Diana looked from Jana to me and back. The best it can do is heal the wounds, but it can't stop the poison, Jana said as she pulled out an needle and some sort of string from her doctor's coat. Gingerly, she began to sew up the stab wound. I pulled the chainless heart out of my pocket and pressed it into the palm of Casey's hand, wrapping her fingers around it. Immediately, the bruises began to dissolve, the cuts slowly but visibly closing up. Could I get her something to wear? I think wearing that can only bring more harm, Diana said, looking in disgust at the grey men's shirt she was wearing, torn and bloodied. Jana nodded as she finished her stitching, gently dabbing the blood away from the wound. Casey rested calmly, her eyes closed and her breathing slow, but mysterious murmurs escaped her lips. Numbly, I brushed strands of hair out of her face, electric tendrils coursing through my fingers. Diana abruptly grabbed my arm, looking me dead in the eye. Be the mate she deserves. Damon. Tears filled her eyes and she quickly looked away, hurrying out of the room. I turned back to Casey. You're going to be all right. Everything will be all right, I soothed, stroking her cheeks softly. Jana placed a pad to the wound before she ushered me to help return Casey onto her back. She winced at the movement, her fingers twitching like she would lash out again. She's a fighter, Jana said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. She'll make it through. For every owner's sake she better. Clasping Casey's hand, feeling for the first time a hollowed heart. Chapter 40 Crimson Poker Table Damon's POV. Diana had dressed Casey in new undergarments, a military insignia t-shirt, and black shorts, making her comfortable. I sat beside the cot, stroking the back of Casey's hand, her fingers still wrapped around the charm. She growled and murmured in her sleep, stirring now and again against her restraints at something she was witnessing. I found myself stroking her hair soothingly, hoping to make her realize that I was there to protect her against her nightmares. But an irresistible scent wafted from Casey's body, screaming out to me. I found the self-control I needed to hold back my wolf, planning to do what I can to make up for Casey's past. She was mine and I was more dedicated than ever to make sure she would be safe with me. At some point within the night, I had fallen asleep with my head resting beside Casey's. I was woken up when I heard the broken door creak open behind me. Amber and Dan had wandered in their pajamas, Amber's eyes red and puffy. Diana told us she was poisoned, Gant said, Amber, releasing a quivering breath. Yeah, wolfsbane, I replied, rubbing my sleep-filled eyes. Is it hurting her? Amber asked, walking up beside me to look down at Casey, taking in her paled skin and mumbled threats. It's hard to tell. She's definitely seeing something she doesn't like, referring to Casey's unconscious snarling. Sweat glistened on her forehead, and she gently pulled at the padded restraints around her wrists and ankles that kept her against the cot. She'll be okay, right? Dan looked at me with a stern look, clearly hiding his concern and maintaining his manly pride. I don't know, I responded after a pause, glancing between Amber and Dan. The poison's going to take its toll on her, but it'll hopefully fade in a few days. Jana had poured nightshade extract on the wound to make it circulate. Promised to keep us up to date. Amber looked me dead in the eye, something she never would have done just a couple days ago, and turned back towards the door, leaving Dan to linger for a minute before obediently following her. I ran a hand through my messy hair hurriedly, studying Casey's wincing face. If only she knew that I wanted to be there for her, to protect her with my life against whatever it was that was terrifying her. All she knew of me then, however, was a jerk, but her life hanging in the balance brought to light how much I truly wanted her. KCSP. OV snakes bound my wrists against a cold and hard stone slab. Blood oozed from the rock and stuck to my back, warm and slippery. I was freezing, unprotected in a frozen wasteland of darkness. Hysterical laughter came from the shadows, some inviting me to play again. I don't want to play, I had said, my arms and legs numb. Come, it will be fun, they hissed back, sharp-toothed grins forming in the air like the Cheshire Cats from Alice in Wonderland. Icy breath brushed past my bare legs, racing goosebumps up my body. In cold, I whimpered, pleading for them to help me instead. The laughter grew, sounding like a pack of rabid hyenas. Suddenly, a towering creature faded into view just above my head, its clawed hands stabbing through my wrists and meeting the stone. It grinned down at me with a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth, its small green eyes staring at me hungrily. I screamed in pain, blood flowing down my arms in rivulets. Get off of me. I howled, unable to extend my claws or canines, feeling helpless and confused. A bleeding monstrous hand reached out for me, and I bit down on it, feeling the boiling blood fill my mouth. The sound of a little girl screaming filled my ears, and I screamed back in horror. But then the face of the pack's healer popped up before me, her hands bleeding from teeth marks that I just knew were my own. I'm really sorry. I cried guiltily, but then something that felt like needles began coursing through my veins, and Jan A.'s face began melting, making space for a monstrous creature. My own terrified scream popped my eardrums and sent a wave of ice water rushing across my body. Come play with us. They hissed and cackled, the monster with his claws through my wrists laughing psychotic ally. But then his grey, matted fur faded away and revealed the face of a god. He was shirtless and had the body of a man made of gold. I felt my heat flood back to me, a hunger I never felt before washing over me. What happened to your shirt? I bit my lip to keep myself from gawking over him, allowing my eyes to gaze upon his chiseled features. Let's play again. The god combusted into flames and ceased to reveal the same beast that had his claws dug through my wrist. I pressed myself against the stone slab, trying to shrink away from it. You'll love this game. Let go of me or I swear I will skin you alive. Red beginning to seep into my vision. Rage boiled behind my eyes, not just at the beast, but at myself, too, for allowing myself to be put into this bloody hell. It's a fun game, the creature spat, burying his carnivorous grin in my face, his breath smelling like rotting flesh. I don't want to play, I murmured, almost afraid to speak any louder. But then another monster appeared at my feet, driving its claws into my ankles, its laugh sounding like a bunch of children's. I wanted to scream again, but my throat was raw and sore, my lungs feeling deflated. She doesn't want to play with us. An aid. The monster at my head complained to the monster at my feet, yet his toothy grin refused to leave his face. Oh dear. No, Mud. That will just not do, the other responded, its voice sounding just like its laugh. What do you think we should do? Anna J., the childish monster asked, blinking wildly. I say we let her play with my new toy, the monster Anna J. snarled, pulling out a large jar of blue liquid from the shadows. The three of them hissed and laughed as Anna J. dropped the jar, the glass shattering over me and the liquid burning through my skin. I yelped and watched the monsters swirl around me, their faces taunting mine, baring their fangs and flashing their claws. I felt my whole world turn upside down and into oblivion. Chapter 41 Wide Awake Damon's P. Oh, fee. I was woken early in the morning by a horrendous scream, ringing my ears. Casey was awake again, shaking with fright and howling in pain. Her eyes were wide open, her irises flickering again like they had the day before. Casey, I said as calmly as any guy could when he is woken up at 4 in the morning from screaming right in his ear. I gripped her forearms reassuringly, straddling her so that I could look her in the eyes, get her to see me. Get away, she seethed through clenched teeth, her eyes burning red and her arms trying to break away from both the restraints in my grip. She arched her back and furiously bit back a scream, her hands balling up into fists. Casey, look at me. I gently grabbed in and tilted her head so that she looked at me, her muscles tensing at my touch. Her eyes flickered again, this time pausing on black, her lips curling into a sly smile. Well, I ain't this cozy, she snickered, looking me up and down. She was dripping with the scent of spice and I found myself once again fighting my instincts, knowing it was the poison that was making her act like this and not her own free will. Come on, sweetheart, snap out of it, I begged, searching her eyes for some sign of the Casey I had come to love. However, they suddenly darkened and red flashed by quickly before they stopped at grey. What did you just call me? She snarled. Her body stilled and I knew instantly I had said something I shouldn't have. Hello, warning growl echoed from her chest as her breathing slowed. Nothing, I blurted, my voice coming out as quiet as a whisper. Casey's eyes narrowed as they bore into mine, her lips pressed together to form a straight line. Don't you ever call me sweetheart, she warned before she winced, a groan trying to force itself through her sealed lips. Or I swear I will gut you like a deer. Her eyes flashed again, but it appeared that Casey was trying to grip her real self, grey pulsing around her pupils while her irises flickered. I'm sorry, I murmured, realizing a moment later what I had called her. She stared up at me with widened eyes, her mouth slightly gaping. What? She asked, more confused than angry. Her voice had dropped to a whisper as well, her irises more grey now than before. I couldn't for many words as she stared up at me, unable to think of an excuse for this slip-up. But then my mind went blank when her lips were pressed to mine, setting off fireworks in every place imaginable. I leaned in, following the motion of her lips before she pulled away, a shimmer in her pupils. She started before she was cut off by another scream, her body trying to lurch forward, but was pulled back by the restraints. She convulsed and I was suddenly covered in blood, a steady stream flowing down Casey's chin. I yelled before my mind could catch up, watching Casey's eyes roll back into her head, more blood spilling out of her now than a gushing stream. I jumped back off her as the healer ran in, her hair all over the place and her robe tightly tied around her. What? Did she flatline? Jana asked tiredly, looking up at me and not down at Casey. Can you not see she's puking up her own blood? I growled, ushering down at the blood that had formed around KC's head and chest. Jana sighed, furiously rubbing the sleep out of her eyes. I didn't expect it this soon, but at least we know that KC's wolf knows what's in her system, Jana said, taking a rag and beginning to gently mop up the blood on the cot. I huffed out a frustrated sigh, pinching the bridge of my nose. What the hell are you talking about? I glared at her as she carefully dabbed the blood on KC's neck, my mate still convulsing. I would have thought your parents had taught it to you. Forcing my fist to tighten. When any species of canine, including werewolves, ingest or take in something that doesn't agree with their body such as poisons, they regurgitate it. KC's wolf is saving her life. This is the infected blood she's coughing up. Jana ranted, though the scene in front of me did not become any less worrisome. Then this is good. Well, it's about as pleasant to her as it is to us. But yeah, it's a good sign. Jana mumbled, ignoring the blood that was splattered against her white robe. Leave me alone. Casey whimpered, thrashing her head to the side, her eyes still shut tight. She fought against the restraints as she spat more blood against Jana's robe, the healer choosing to ignore it with a groan. Why won't you leave me alone? God knows what the poor girl is seeing. Jana blew, cleaning up the last of the blood that coated her face and chest. Let's move her to the other cot. No way this blood is coming out anytime soon. Hesitantly, Jana unclasped the restraints and looked at me for help. Carefully I scooped her up and followed Jana to the second cot, wincing as her claws dug into my shoulder and chest before I laid her on the mattress and regrettably restrained her once again. Will she forget it all when she's better? I kept my eyes on Casey as I spoke. The after effects can look either way. She may forget everything since the incident or shall remember it as though it kept replaying itself in her head. So she may forget everything that's happened during this time. Are you usually this slow, or is it just the fact that it's about 4:40 on a Saturday morning? She questioned with a hint of frustration. Remind me to never get you up before 8 o'clock ever again. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylin Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Returning the tired and bleak look she was giving me. Smart idea. She returned as she turned and walked out. She should be fine for the rest of the morning. If not, find Ben or someone. She called back. Chapter 40 to Black Queen Casey SP. Ovi, do you want to play now? The sharp, toothed grins called. The monsters had long disappeared, leaving me in the darkness, crumpled and hugging my knees on the cold stone. I was shivering, coated in my own blood after I had coughed it all, almost positive I had lost a lung with it. No, I moaned. I'm tired, I'm cold, and I just want to sleep. I thought of the only thing that could bring health, smile to my face the way Damon had rolled my name off his tongue. Not KC, my wolf's name, but my real name. I'm sure this game will warm you right to the bone, they growled, dragging the word bone. I bit my lip in hopes to hold back the pained scream that wanted to escape as a new wave of agony coursed deep through my body. They laughed hysterically, the towering grey beast that went by nomad slinking out of the shadows with a grin that was literally spread from ear to ear. He meandered towards me until he reached the slab, towering over me and leaning down so his fur brushed my cheek. I know you want to play, he whispered seductively in my ear. He softly dragged a clawed finger down the side of my face as his yellow eyes met mine. I stared back blankly, too tired to find a response. Another scream tried to bubble up, but I bit harder down on my lip, making it bleed. I squeezed my eyes shut, begging for the pain to end, for the nightmare to fade away. Relax, KC, the beast cooed, gripping my jaw and tugging it down so that it unhooked from my impaling fangs. I winced at the sting of pain as tears pricked at my eyes. Why not just finish me off? Why make me suffer? I whimpered, unable to make my voice any louder than a hoarse whisper. Nomad chuckled, echoing on into the darkness around me. Because, if we can't break you, we can't kill you, Nomad hissed with a teasing smile. I stared past him into the shadows while his words sunk in, my worn brain trying to dumb it down. If I play, this will all end. I looked up at the monster, my fingers trembling as I brought them closer to my body, trying to shrink away and disappear from sight. Just one game, he confirmed, his pupils flickering mysteriously, almost hungrily. I thought about it. What did I have to go back to? A mate with conflicted feelings. A dead father. A homicidal rogue. Revenge-for-gun bullies. I blew out a shaky sigh, stirring uncomfortably. However, Nomad's fist came crashing down on the rock bed just in front of my face, his smile still plastered to his lips, but his eyes were reflecting rage. As I stared hard into those wild eyes, I felt my fist clench and my jaw tighten, a growl attempting to rumble from my chest. He was just like those bullies, those jerks. No, I said sternly, sitting up to look down on Nomad. His eyes bulged as his Cheshire grin faltered. He slowly straightened himself so that he towered over me, but as I climbed to my feet, I felt like the one winning the control. His yellow eyes turned red as he howled a monstrous roar, his disgusting breath making my eyes water. Before I could act, Nomad drove his claws through my chest, piercing my heart and lungs and pinning me back against the table. You no longer have a choice, he snarled, driving his other clawed hand through my stomach. I cried out as he twisted his claws, widening the wounds and forcing out a tsunami of blood. I tried to gasp, but I was drowning in my own blood, a steady stream flowing down the corner of my mouth. I gazed up at my murderer, only to see that his fur and muzzle had melted away to revealed oil, his reddened eyes smirking at me. It was a pleasure doing business with you, Casey Damon's P.O.V. Damon, we need to talk. I glanced back to meet Downs. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And Diana's gazes, Diana sopping with anger. Now is not the time, I replied, returning my attention to Casey, my fear rising when she had begun tugging at the restraints while she shivered beneath the blanket I had thrown over her. I felt Dan place his hand firmly on his shoulder, forcing me to look up at him. Now, he stated with finality, I met his eyes and knew it was serious. I slowly got up from my chair and glanced back at Casey once more before following the three out and closing the door behind me, Casey's moans still reaching my ears. What is so important that you needed to pull me away from my mate who could possibly be dying? I emphasized the last part in a hushed whisper. Why the hell is that son of a BTCH still alive? Diana snarled, her fangs bared and her eyes furiously glowing grey-blue. I matched her glare, not sure how to answer the protective mother wolf without being attacked. It was either end his life or help save Casey's life. I chose Casey over him. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Glancing towards Amber and Dan. And you're telling me you cowed and spared your seconds to slit the bastard's throat. Diana spat, followed by an aggressive growl, and sorry for being more concerned about my mate. I defended. Diana's face hardened as she pressed her lips together. Your mate, she mimicked. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I had thought you could change, actually give a damn about others. But you proved me wrong. Damon, you're selfish, spineless, cold-hearted bastard who doesn't deserve to label my daughter as your mate. She pronounced every syllable clearly through clenched teeth. For all I care, you can rot in hell. Diana and began. Don't even. She warned, snapping her head towards the beta. Dan immediately closed his mouth, but kept his eyes hard and stern, a serious look directed at Diana. Casey will not hear about this. Diana looked at the three of us with demanding eyes. She has a right to know. Diana, Amber said softly. Diana growled at her, but not nearly as viciously as she had at me. What she doesn't know can't her. Hast my baby been through enough? I could see tears gathering in her eyes as she looked up at me. I know my little girl, and I know she won't give up until Shess gotten what Shess wanted. And I bet you that all she'll want is to have that devil dead, even if she has to go out there and kill him herself. I knew Diana was right. Casey was a persistent, primal she-wolf, and I was certain that she would go after him. I couldn't lose Casey all over again. I just couldn't. Fine. I agreed. Diana stared up at me with a cold yet appreciative look before she socked off, leaving Dan and Amber staring after her with almost ashamed expressions. If Casey finds out that we've lied to her, it won't end well for us, Amber murmured, looking down at her feet. I nodded, not wanting to imagine what our mutual feral friend would do. That was when I noticed it was too quiet. No murmurs, no moans, no yells. My heart dropping to the icy pit of my stomach, I hurried back into the infirmary to find Casey laying still, her eyes wide open but staring out at nothing. Blood was trickling down her chin, but this was like before when she was practically coughing up her internal organs. Amber ran in with a horrified expression plastered onto her face, Dan right behind her and running around to the other side of the cot. He pressed his fingers to her neck. I can't find a pulse. I yelled, unstrapping Casey from the cot while Dan pumped her chest, trying to get her to breathe. What now? Jana groaned as she ran in, her eyes darting from distraught Amber to Dart trying to revive Casey, I too shocked to think of anything to do. Shit. Shit, shit, she cursed as she ran to Casey, pressing her ear to Casey's lips. The poisons reached her heart. How long ago did she stop breathing? The healer asked frantically. I am not sure. I just walked out for a minute and when we came back I trailed, unable to finish the sentence. I peered over Jana's shoulder, watching numbly as Jana rolled up the bottom of Casey's shirt to reveal her stomach where every blue was revealed through her paled skin. What the hell? Dan gasped, staring wide-eyed at the terrifying image in front of him. This isn't good, Jana said, pressing down her stomach, just below her rib cage. More blood flowed from Casey's mouth, pooling around her. She's drowning in her own blood, she informed. Well, what the hell can you do? I snapped, my instincts triggered and ready to burst. Dan, pass me the scalpel, she ordered, pointing to an instrument on the counter behind him. With a quivering hand, he did what she asked and I felt the blood rush from my head as Jana made deep incisions in both Casey's abdomens. She ran to the cupboard and tossed half of it out onto the floor until she found what she was looking for, two short straw-like objects. As she ran back, the world seemed to roll forward in slow motion. Looming over Casey, Jana plunged the straws into the incisions. Casey lurched forward as she sucked in a forced breath before her eyes rolled into the back of her head and she fell back unconscious. Chapter 43 Impossibly Possible KCSP. OV. My vision wavered, my eyelids heavy, and my breathing forced and excruciatingly tormenting. I thought being stabbed once was painful enough. Turns out, when you're stabbed in the effing lungs, it's a whole other hell. That's going to keep her alive until the blood floods out of her lungs, Jana informed, her voice distant. Immediately, I felt someone tightly clasping my hand as though it were a lifeline. My pulsing vision and the weakness of my limbs prevented me from looking at who it was, but the numb sparks that shot up my arm reassured me that it was indeed Damon. Then what? I barely heard Dan ask. Two silhouettes appearing at my side opposite as Damon. She should be fully conscious, weak and hungry, but awake, I heard the doctor say, a light suddenly being shown in my eyes. Was I began, but my voice cowled and go on. Sure, just relax. Sweetie, Casey, Damon cooed, quickly rethinking his words. Even at just the start of the nightmarish nick my body stiffened with fright. He must be noticed because he began stroking my hair soothingly, a clear attempt at calming my nerves. What's your name? Jana cut in. Casey, C. Blazy. How old are you? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Where do you live currently? Jana continued, while she examined me carefully from head to toe. Ottawa, Canada. I offered as I watched Damon's face become worrisome before I was unable to help myself to a grin. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Ashington, Connecticut, I answered truthfully. I heard Amber stifle a laugh that was mixed with a sob. Dan's chuckle, though quiet, cowled and hid any of his humorous personality. Even when you have the straws dug into your lungs, you can't miss the chance to be a wise ass, Dan muttered with a brood grin. Gotta brighten myself up some way. Sure as hell you're out to teary to Crackerjay. Joke. I choked, every word spiking pain in my chest and making me flinch. The room went quiet. What do you expect, T? I have to freaking tibs deep in my effing lungs, I said hoarsely, trying to reassure them that I was all right, minus the fact of the type pain I was suffering from both lungs filled with my own blood, and the only thing allowing me to breathe were two metal straws sticking out of my chest. Why don't we save the funny business for later, and right now you just rest? There'll be plenty of time later to laugh around. Damon smiled softly, stroking the back of my hand with his thumb. I tried to nod, but all that happened was a screaming pain in my chest, so I just gave him a look that said I understood. His smile slightly widened as I let my eyes flutter shut and let sleep take over, hoping to stay unconscious through the terrorizing discomfort. Wait, why the hell was he smiling at me like that? Damon's key. Ovi. At least we know the Casey we know and absolutely adore isn't dead, Dan said with a half-hearted smile. However, I barely heard him as I watched Casey quickly fall asleep, unable to tear my eyes away from her face. It was funny really it took the threatening of Casey's life to get me to really notice her, to let my instincts take over, and allow myself to love her. Now I couldn't leave her side without thinking about her. Damon. Amber snapped me out of my thoughts and brought my attention to the heart she clutched in her hand. You must drop the charm, she said as I grabbed it, feeling that I had been pulled into my own world as I stared at it, mesmerized by its designs and lust. I could feel the power emanating off of it in my palm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The beta female said, holding out a silver chain. I have plenty of chains and necklaces. I can sacrifice one for the greater good. She smiled, glancing down at Casey before looking back up at me. I caught her motion and after sliding the locket onto the chain, I tied it around Casey's neck, admiring how it looked over her pale skin. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The stone went into action, the bite marks on her bottom lip closed up and you could visually see the flesh around the straws trying to heal, the blood disappearing and the wounds trying to close. Is it safe to remove them now? I asked the healer, whom had remained silent and steadily watched Casey from a safe distance. She approached us, and before she answered, she gently pressed down on Casey's stomach like she had before. No blood. Seems like the fragment is capable of freaking miracles, Jana said, prying out the straws and watching in awe as the circular wounds closed almost immediately, any trace of them being there disappearing. Or miraculous healing, Dan murmured with a chuckle, receiving an elbow in the gut from Amber. Now all she can do is rest and hope what's left of the poison circulates out. However, it seems her wolf did a pretty good job at getting rid of most of it, Jana stated as she glanced over at the crimson stains on the other cotton floor. And what do we tell my baby girl when she opens those gorgeous eyes for good? Diana hissed from behind me, almost coming out of nowhere, that the rogues are dead. Chapter 40 for Stitch My Heart Casey SP. The next time I opened my eyes, it was sometime in the evening, the sky through the window a pinkish hue. Good evening, sleeping beauty, Dan mused, looking down at me with a cheeky grin. I couldn't help but laugh, surprised by the pain it brought to my chest. I knew right then that it would be a while until they would stop hurting. Dan, I greeted blandly before glancing around the room and almost feeling disheartened to see how empty it was. Where's Amber? Not here, Dan replied. I raised an eyebrow at him. No shit, Sherlock. Dan forced out a fake gasp as he put on a look of false offense. Hey, no using Sherlock Holmes' name in vain, he exclaimed, forcing a chuckle out of me. Slowly, I tried to sit up right then, but Dan gently pressed down on my shoulders. No, he said. Jana said you should just rest for a little while longer before you're up and about. He told me, talking professionally and trying to sound like a doctor. That would be a dark day if Dan ever decided he wanted to become a doctor. I've been strapped to this bed for several days and now I can't even go for a run. Maybe it would have been better if Nomad had finished me off, I joked, but looked up at Dan, who stared at me with utter confusion. Never mind. Doctor's orders, not mine, he dismissed, raising his hands in defense. And if you plan on keeping those useful little lungs of yours, you'll follow them, Jana said as she walked into the room, giving me a pointed look. I moaned dramatically, getting her to raise her eyebrows at me. Who needs lungs anyway? I shrugged sarcastically. Jana rolled her eyes as she exited the room, Dan snickering beside me. I think you've been spending way too much time with me, Dan laughed. You think? I'm actually a little worried. Afraid to chuckle. Slowly, Dan's smile faded and he looked at me with something I don't think I'd ever seen him look serious. Very serious. Damon was terrified, my hands clenching the sheets. Archias really changed for the better, he continued, not breaking his seriousness. I know, I hummed, unable to hide the goofy grin that grasped my lips. Good, because you two need to get together soon, Gant said, clasping his hands over his mouth, then nose to create a mask. Because your effing heat is suffocating me. Do you know how painful it is to be turned on by one of your best friend's heat? Not to mention I am very happily mated. I couldn't help but laugh, which then faded into a painful cough. Are you trying to kill her? Amber giggled from the doorway as she walked in, a wide grin in her face. All I could do was smile from my cot as she walked up and stood beside Dan's chair, a hand on his shoulder. How are you, sunshine? I'm just fantastic. I rolled my eyes humorously. Everybody know him up yet? No, Amber drawled, beginning to rock awkwardly on the balls of her feet. I stared at her, confused as to why not, and why would that be? Dan and Amber exchanged a covert glance, because they answered simultaneously. I stared at them blankly, since when did because become an answer? I went to cross my arms but then thought better of it and just stuck with using serious facial expressions to break them. Their bodies stiffened, and I knew instantly they were talking to each other through the mind link or someone else was talking to them. "Well, that's our cue," Amber saying, hastily grabbing Dan's hand and hurrying out of the room, both of them flashing me wry grins as they ran out. I stared at the doorway, extremely lost and confused. Sighing, I stared up at the ceiling and just took careful breaths, trying to fill my lungs without them screaming in pain. I closed my eyes, concentrating on my breathing and feeling grateful when the pain was getting more tolerable. I opened an eye and glanced towards the door, feeling my heart flutter when I saw Damon standing there as a dark pair of jeans and a black shirt that outlined all his muscles. My heat sparked and I felt my breath catch in my throat. He stalked towards my cot, a soft smile playing his lips. My body was instantly paralyzed as he bent down and scooped me up in his strong arms bridal style. "WH, what are you doing?" Stringing my arms around his neck. He just smiled, but kept his gaze ahead of him as he climbed up the stairs. My heart was hammering furiously against the inside of my chest as Damon continued to climb, his eyes glinting mischievously as they flickered black. He continued past the floor of our bedrooms and climbed even farther up another couple steps, arriving at a short hallway with a large wooden door at the end. Supporting me with one arm, he pushed open the doors to reveal the alpha suit. Rose petals were spread across the floor, trailing up to the large, silken bed that was drizzled in the red petals. "Damon," I gasped, gazing around the candle-lit room. He laid me in the center of the bed while he straddled me, his eyes gazing into mine. "Will you give us a chance?" He looked at me with pleading, delicate eyes. "Casey Blairzy, will you be my Lunar?" I couldn't find any words. I just stared at him, my heart racing in my chest and my body numb with shock. "Well, you know, I don't mate with jerks," I hissed when I finally found my voice, throwing my arms around his neck. "I'm a changed man, Casey," he claimed, gazing into my eyes with sincerity. I knew then that he really had changed, that my mate had finally accepted, finally become the mate I wanted, the mate I needed. With my arms around his neck, I drew him in, pressing my lips against his. "Please, Damon, fall on. Claim me," I whispered in between kisses. He didn't waste a second after my plea and pulled my shirt over my head, leaving me in my lacy bra. At a slow and gentle pace, he trailed kisses down my neck, his fingers brushing the mark he had imprinted at the crook of my shoulder. I ran my hands through his hair, hugging him closer to me. "Casey?" Damon breathed against my neck, his hot breaths ending a shiver down my spine. "Yes, Damon?" I asked breathlessly, tilting my head back to give him better access. "I love you," he whispered against my ear, nipping my earlobe. I purred content lie, feeling my instincts surface and my canines and claws emerge. "And I think I love you, too," I said, tearing his shirt off his body and running my hands along his hard chest. He growled affectionately, placing kisses over his mark as he ever so slowly removed my shorts. "You know," he paused to tenderly kiss the mark, "I will never do anything to hurt you." Another kiss. "Never do anything that will make you uncomfortable." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Never force anything upon you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I will protect you with my life. Just a little pain ever hurt nobody. Undoing his belt. He looked at me with raised eyebrows and a sly grin. "You little vixen," he murmured against my skin. Ignoring the pinch of pain and pushing Damon over so that I sat over him. I pinned his arms against the bed as I sat at his waist, admiring him. By the way, Mr. Fallon, you're not going to be the only dominate one in this relationship. I purred, dragging a nail down the length of his arm and down his chest. He chuckled slyly as he gently pushed me back against the sheets and again straddled me. We'll see about that. Capturing my lips. I moaned against his lips as my heat struck my stomach, my body beginning to tremble. For crying out loud, I breathed. Claim me already. Yes, Mum. Epilogue KCSP. OV. I clutched the bouquet of snow-white roses close to my chest. My arm wound around, dense and tightening with every nerve, racking step. Every other sighs were on me as I walked down the path of rose petals, nearing the altar where Jana stood. A steady stream of sunlight snaked its way through the tree branches, giving the forest the feel of something from a fairy tale. The flowers were already beginning to blossom on the trees and bushes, adding color and life to the woodland scenery. Del and Amber had really gone out of their way to find the perfect spot. You hold on to my arm any tighter, and I swear you're going to tear it right off. Dan whispered humorously to me, a smirk playing his lips. Sorry, I replied under my breath as I hastily loosened my grip. Don't worry about it, Mrs. Fallon, his green eyes flashing with brotherly affection. I rolled my eyes as I covertly elbowed him in the ribs. For another 5 good minutes I'm still Casey Blaise, I retorted, blowing a strand of hair that had come loose from the diamond-studded barrette out of my face. He chuckled before falling quiet again, his arm gently supporting my own. As I neared the archway where the trees leaned against each other, I caught sight of my mother sitting in the front row beside Ben. She dabbed at tears in her eyes as I walked past her. I knew she was thinking the same thing as I was if only my dad was here to see this. I threw a reassuring smile back. As I glanced over the crowd, my heart stopped on a familiar face. There he was, standing towards the back with a half smile on his thin lips, his grey eyes grinning broadly at me the way they always did. Tears of confusion, joy, and even fear welled up in my eyes, warping my vision. I blinked them back and looked to find that he had vanished, like he was never there before. Thinking it was a trick of the mind, I turned my attention to Damon as Dan handed me off to him before he went to stand behind the alpha. Not only was the beta escorting me down the aisle in my late father's place, but he was also my mate's best man. The lunar pack is gathered here today to celebrate the mating of Lunar Katie Caroline Blerzi and Alpha Dame and Gabriel Fallon. Jana began in her usual calm and careless tone. I shifted awkwardly in my black Converse as I glanced up at Damon, unable to look away when our eyes met. His brown ones were bright with life and affection, completely the opposite than they were almost a year before. Jana went on, but I didn't catch another word as I disappeared into Damon's soft eyes, my knees feeling weak. The 4 months, 24 days, and 14 hours that Damon and I have been mated has been the best time of my life. It was almost as if he was making up for the 4 years of the miserable life he had given me back in middle school. Do you, Damon Fallon, take Casey Blaise to be your one only Luna? To cherish her, to shower her in affection, and to stay by her side in sickness and in health? The healer stated nonchalantly before muttering, Not that you haven't or anything already. I do. Damon smiled, turning to face me while he reached for my hand, clasping it in his. I exhaled a sigh of relief, feeling stupid that for a second before I had actually thought he would say no, as if in one night he had become the Damon I knew before my kidnapping. And do you, Casey Blaise, take Dame and Fallon to be your lovely and dedicated alpha? To love and to hold, in sickness and in blah blah blah. Janet ruled. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Not only Damon and I laugh, but also Amber, who was my maid of honor, and Dan. I do, I breathed in before Jana could say, You may now kiss the bride or whatever. I shoved the roses into her hands and threw my arms around his neck, while I crashed my lips against his. My husband's and mate's arms instinctively wrapping around my waist and holding me closer. I barely heard the cheering of the pack in the background as I lost myself in the kiss. Damon literally swept me off my feet and held me bridal style, carrying me back down the aisle. Wild and Amber followed the pack, pelting us with rice. I really do hate weddings. I laughed, holding on to Damon tightly. Why the heck did we decide to have one again? He chuckled as we made our way back through the forest and towards the pack house. My mother. I rolled my eyes as he carried me into the house. After what I put her through, it was the least I could do. We continued up the many flights of stairs. Dan and Amber had gone and headed off to their own room, the beta suit that they had inherited the day I had officially become lunar. Oh yeah, he mused as he carried me into our room. At least you were able to get away with the converse, he said as he laid me down on the neatly made bed. Please, like it ever were those 5-inch ankle breakers. I sneered as I ran the material of my dress through my fingertips. Damon jumped onto the bed beside me, laying on his side so to look at me. Besides, I think my high tops look better with this dress than any pair of heels would. I just think it's more you, Damon purred as he ran a hand up the front of my exposed leg. And I think you look amazing in this dress. Maybe a wedding wasn't that bad an idea, he cooed as I went to straddle him. I could never make it to the altar wearing a full skirt, so my friends and I had found a dress that had a front that ended mid-thigh and a full-length back. The top had a sweetheart neckline that was patterned in a minimum amount of diamond sequins. I had made it clear that I didn't want anything too flashy. Tough why. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Logan, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And I got exactly what fit me most. No, but I could have just gotten the dress without having the big ceremony. I giggled as I leaned down to place kisses along his collarbone. He growled affectionately as he placed his hands on my hip. I guess, he hummed against my skin. A smirk tugged at my lips as I reached down for my Converse, carefully dropping them beside the bed. Damon went for the zipper of my dress as I worked at his tie, both of them pooling on the floor. Oh dear, I almost forgot about after party. I sighed beside his ear. He was so deep into his wolf that he didn't hear the trickery in my voice, and before he knew it, I had shifted and was already bounding down the stairs. I had made it out the door when I heard a deep growl echo from behind me, and I glanced back long enough to see a big burly grey wolf sprinting after me. I mentally grinned as I pushed past a couple people who were making their way back from the ceremony and headed for the woods, feeling a little childish when a few of them watched Damon chase me into the tree line with soft smiles on their faces. Leaves rustled as I ran by, twigs snapping beneath my paws. My ears flickered when I heard Damon's panting behind me, my tail wagging slightly as I jumped over a fallen tree, only to find myself tumbling down a hill that was shielded with brush. Shaking snag leaves from my fur, I staggered to my feet and was about to make a sprint for it again when I was tackled back down. Damon's paws pinned against my chest and his muzzle an inch away from mine. Nice try, Vixen, he cooed as he pressed the tip of his nose against mine. Well, what do you expect? I can't give in just yet. The adventure continues with Casey and Damon. Subscribe to follow their journey.